everyone, it's Janice from Le Rue de Fleur. Welcome back into the studio today. We are going to be celebrating 4-Patch February. So all month long, I am going to showcase several different projects that work off of the very basic 4-patch block, which is sort of like the pillar of quilting. So if you've not quilted before, you're new to sewing, this month is for you. We're going to do a little skill building. It's going to be great and fun. Today's project, I have a 4-patch coaster for you that's perfect for Valentine's Day, kind of more just in the way that we orient the blocks, but the whole thing would be a great building block. They're super simple and easy, and I'm going to show you exactly what you need and how to do that, whether you want to do it on your machine or completely by hand. This is one that you could accomplish like completely by hand if you wanted to, because there's that simple. So if that's something you're interested in, stay tuned and I will catch you on the flip side. Okay, so honestly, this is the second time that I am filming it, so you're going to see a little difference because I already completed my 4-patch coasters that look like this little heart shape, but then I lost the beginning of the footage, so I'm going to have to redo like how to put it together from the beginning. But you can see what we're going to end with, which I think is kind of fun today. So we're going to do a really simple little heart shape and make these little quilted coasters. Now, if you're not interested in Valentine's Day, maybe you don't care, you don't celebrate it, or you just don't like that much seasonal decor, or you just want to make these as gifts for people in the future, I do offer little 4-patch coaster kits. So this is what they would end up looking like. This one is made with a variety of different little camping themed fabrics. And you can see that on the back. It's a really cute little map print, but this is how they would turn out. It's a 4-patch, which, as I said in the introduction, is a pillar of quilting and sewing. So it's very basic, using 4 different patches. Usually you alternate like dark and light so that you can really see the pattern there. But this is a great basic to get started with. If you're interested, I do sell like non-seasonal kits, and in the kit you would get all of the little squares to complete the project. You also get all of the backing fabrics that you need, batting, and it comes with the instructions inside. So I will link those below if that's something that you're interested in purchasing. These are a great make and take project, or a great project for someone who is just getting into sewing. You can do this all by hand. All you'll need is just some very basic materials. So I'm going to get those rounded up and we'll get started. Okay, for today's project, you will need a selection of small fabrics that you want to use. I have a leftover strip here and a leftover little cutoff from something else. For the hearts, you'll need 3 red squares and 1 white square. Or if you just want to make them non-holiday themed, you'll need 2 squares that go together and then 2 different colored squares, okay? But something where you can get a 2.5-inch square cut out of it. This is also a great project that is useful for recycling materials. So you could use an old cotton shirt and cut different pieces out of 2 different shirts that you liked that went together. But you'll need a strip of fabric that will allow you to get at least 3 for today's project of the same, and then a contrasting color. In this case, I'm using white to stick with the Valentine theme. Then we will need some kind of measuring apparatus. You can either use a traditional ruler, or if you're going to do a lot of sewing, I would suggest that you invest in an omni grid of some size. This is a 6.5-inch square that has something sticky on it, but and it has all of these really nice intricate grid lines that are useful when you're sewing and you're trying to make more precise cuts. So if you're going to be getting into quilting more and sewing more, I would invest in one of these. But if you're just going to make a couple of hand projects, you can get by with a regular ruler. Then we are going to need a pencil so we can mark our little measurements out. You'll need something to cut your fabric with. So I have a rotary cutter, and then you would need a mat to put it on, or you can use traditional scissors, and you'll just have to be really careful when you're following those lines. And finally, you'll need a needle and thread, or you'll need a sewing machine, depending on what you want to work with. Okay, so to get started, I am going to measure out a couple of 2.5-inch squares. I already have this one cut off, so that one's good to go. I am going to use my Omni Grid, but again, you can use just a traditional ruler too. I'm going to line this up over here, and I always start like when I have this a little bit just above where I need to be. So I think you can see the 2.5-inch down here, but I'm going to go ahead and make my first cut. So I'm just holding my ruler in place, and then I'm trimming out around it. Okay. And that gives me that nice sharp corner. If I were using a pencil and I was going to hand cut it, I'm going to find the 2.5-inch line on this side, 2.5-inch line here, and I would just draw around it with a pencil, and then I would cut that line. Okay. Again, if you were going to use just a traditional ruler, you would find your 2.5-inch mark, right? So 2.5, and then you would draw some lines all the way across, and then you would turn it, and you would come from this edge, and you would draw those lines, and you would just have to connect a few dots so that you could cut it out with your scissors. But I'm just going to finish with my Omni Grid ruler because it makes a nice straight cut. And that's kind of what you want to pay attention to when you're working with any of your materials. You want them to start out nice and straight so they can end nice and straight, right? Because the little discrepancies will continue to add up, all right? So we are going to lay it out. Oop, getting off the page a little bit here. So we're going to lay it out like this, and I need one more to fill in over here. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that out. I'm just lining my fabric up and then making those cuts. And just do the best that you can to be straight. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially on something this small, but you do want to try your best. All right, so now I have all of these squares, and I'm going to lay them out like this so that it starts to look like a heart. So I think you can see there, it's looking like a heart. Now what I need to do is just put the right sides together. So right sides together are these printed fabrics where the print is. So you can see on the back of the fabric, not as pretty. So we're going to use the pretty sides, and they need to go together. So I'm just going to lay my fabrics one on top of each other, just like that, right sides together. And then I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch down each side. If you were hand sewing, you would want to measure a 1/4 inch. So you would lay your ruler on and then make yourself a line all the way across at a 1/4 inch. And then you would sew right along that line, all the way. Okay. You can also use the Omni Grid and do the same thing. So you would draw a line all the way across, and then you're going to sew across that line, and I will show you that in a clip coming up. But if you're going to use your machine right now, you'll pop it in your machine and you will sew them together. If you want, you can put a little pin in to hold them in place, like right through the center here where you're not going to stitch. But since I stitch all the time, I'm just going to go ahead and sew them together, and then I will come right back. Okay, once you have them all sewn together, and you can see my stitches are right here on my measurement line, you're going to open them up, and you want to press to the dark side, so your darker side of fabric, and you can finger press simply by pushing the fabric open and down flat with your fingers. And see how it's pressed to the dark? That way you can't see it through this lighter fabric, right? So pressing to the dark. And for our dark fabrics on top of each other, since it doesn't matter which direction it goes, I'm just going to press it in the opposite direction than I pressed the last one. You can also use your hot iron if you have one available. And now see how they're pressed different directions? That's going to help me out because when I go to put it together, I'm going to lock those seams right there. See the little bumps and how they catch on top of each other? And that makes a really great alignment. So they just kiss and align right there, perfect for Valentine's Day. And then we're going to do the same thing on this one. So we're just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam connecting all 4 of these with right sides together. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and I'll be right back. And voila, now we have our little heart-shaped pot holder. So I would press this open, and then we are going to be ready to move on to our next steps. If you're hand sewing, you would just sew right along that seam with a basic running stitch. Just make sure that you're knotting at the beginning and the end. Also, if you are using your machine, you could back stitch there, but since it's such a small piece and this is really all we're doing with it, you don't have to really worry about that. Next, we need to cut out our batting and our backing to fit this little guy, and I think that's coming up in the next clip. Okay, if you wanted to sew this completely by hand, say you don't have a machine and you're just learning how to sew, or you just want to travel with this, this is a great little handheld thing that you can take with you if you're traveling. All you would need to do is use your ruler. Even if you don't have a ruler like this, again, you can just find the 1/4 inch mark on your ruler. If you have a traditional ruler, you'll have to go like this and then create a little notch mark, and then go down to the other end, create a notch mark, and then connect the dots. For mine, I'm just going to line up right here, grab a pencil, and draw my line. So I'm just going back and forth so I can get a nice line that I can see, and I am going to do a running stitch right down that line. So I'm going to stack my 2 pieces on top of each other. If it helps you, you can pin them in the center, but I'm not going to bother because they're really, really small and I don't want to poke my hand, but if you want to, you can do that. It might make you feel better. I am just using a regular needle and thread. I'm using a contrasting color. It's always better if you can use a color that would blend in. And I've tied a very, very simple knot at the bottom. It's 2 strands of thread. You don't have to do that. You could do a single strand, but there's more of a chance you'll pull your knot out. Again, I'm going to lock my knot. So I'm just going to come up from the back and find that line. And I'm going to go back down through on my line about, let's see, what's the distance there? About an 1/8 of an inch, or yeah, about an 1/8 of an inch away. Okay. And we're going to aim to keep them as even as possible. So to lock my knot, like I said before, I'm just going to go back through that little loop that's there between my threads. And I have to spread them apart a little bit first so I can see the loop, but there's the loop, okay? And I'm just going to go back through once I have my needle on the back of my cloth, and then that way I can't pull my knot out, okay? And that can just get tucked on, tucked down, and you can trim that a little bit tighter. Okay, so now I have my needle at the back of my thread. If you've never sewn before, you just, every time you're coming through, you just want to be going, if your needle and thread are in the back, they need to be coming up from the back, just like that. And then I'm pulling on my needle, and when I get my needle through, I'm pulling on my thread till I have a little bit of tension, but I'm not yanking it really tight. Okay, and then when I'm on the top, I'm coming back down through the top. So everything is going perpendicular to the fabric right there, and I'm staying about the same distance away. And you just want to follow your line and be as consistent as possible. Again, just pull your thread until it comes the whole way through. And you get a little bit of resistance, but you're not puckering your fabric, okay? So every time you're going through, you want to be perpendicular. You don't want this thread wrapping around the side, or you're going to get a bunch of bunching up over the top. So just up and down, really basic. Again, this is so relaxing. If you are new to sewing, if you get it caught, just use your other hand to loosen it. It's so relaxing to sew. And it is a very practical skill. You can do lots of things with it. You can be very creative, like we are being. We're also making something that's fairly practical. And once you know some basic stitches, you can fix so many things. So this running stitch, along with the ladder stitch that we're going to go over later, are some of the most basic stitches that you can learn and have in your repertoire so that you can fix just about anything. Okay, so to finish it, you just want to come up and we're just going to go through the last stitch that we had. Try to keep this from twisting. We're going to create a little loop around our last stitch. Oops, not going that way. So creating a little loop around our last stitch. So we have a little knot there, and then we're just going to pull it tight and flat, and then you have a knot. And this one has a little extra piece of thread, but that's fine. And that will be buried behind everything. So it's not super particular right now. And then you would just go and you would press it open just like you would if you had machine pressed it. So just using your fingers and smoothing those fabrics. And then you would do the same thing that I showed earlier. So you're going to open them up. You're going to line up those seams where you've pressed them. And then you're going to draw a line across here again. And sew right along the line like you did last time so that all your seams look like that. And you've completed your square. So I am going to finish mine on machine, but then to do the rest of this, you would, to complete it with the quilting, batting, and all of those layers is the same thing. Okay. So you would just use your same thread, creating a little simple knot. You still would want to leave it open. I think this time you definitely would want to pin it because this is like too much to hold, but just for the sake of showing, I'm going to go with it. And then you would draw your 1/4 inch line all the way around. So just lay your ruler down. And it's going to be a little bit harder if you do it on the batting side, so I'd probably flip it over and do it on the fabric side. But also I have white fabric over there and I don't want to see a line, but it would be on the inside, so I think you would be good. But so then you're going to just come up and you would still leave that little gap, the same as I describe in the directions for just using a machine. And you're just going to, again, catch that little loop where your needle or where your knot is, pull it through, and just stitch right along that line through all the layers. It's a little bit more resistance on your needle because you have more layers, but not too much. I don't think you're going to experience an issue if you want to hand sew. So you would just follow those lines all the way around, still leaving yourself that 2-inch pocket to turn, and then you would be all good. So just sewing along that, and then here is how it would look from the other side. Very cool. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish that on my machine just because it's faster and I have a machine, so why not? And then I will come back and show you the finished coasters. Now I need to cut my backing. That's the same way that I did to cut my batting, is you're just going to lay your ruler. If you don't have a ruler, you're just going to, or if you don't have one like this that's a square, you're just going to measure 5 inches square and then cut that out. You can even use scissors. You would just draw it on. For me, I have this nice tool, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. I just put my ruler on here. I'm going to line up and go along this red line of the fabric. And I probably don't need to be over this far because I don't want to waste a bunch of fabric, so I'm going to scoot it back a tiny bit. Ooh, sorry, my camera's in the way. And then I'm going to rotate and do a 5-inch square. So I'm just lining it up along that side that I wanted to capture that whole stripe. Again, this is a great way you can make double use of any clothing that you might have that you have a hole in somewhere, but you still really like the design. Use it as the backing for something, like why not, right? Okay, so I'm going to trim around all of those sides and making sure that each corner layer is lined up in here. If you drew it on with a ruler, just try to stay as close on your line as possible. But again, it's a little bit bigger, so it's allowing us that wiggle room of making a mistake, okay? And then I did go ahead and quilt on my machine just a little bit right there. Again, you can do that with your hand. You could stitch down through here with a big chunky thread. Anything you like. You could make some little X's, anything that you desire to decorate it. And now I'm just going to trim out around this as well. If I were top sewing, I would do the same thing. If I were going to sew it, I would just trim it out so that it's good to go. So this is 4 inches. So I'm going to line up, and I'm mostly going to pay attention to this seam here as well as each edge and make sure that I'm not trimming off anything important. And it's okay if there's a little tiny bit of overhang. That'll get caught in our stitch lines. But I really want to make sure that it looks straight, so I'm paying attention to these seam lines that I've created and making sure that I'm staying right on those seams. Wonderful. Now, if you're doing it on your machine, you're going to put right sides together and sew all the way around, leaving a few inches at the bottom so you can turn it right side out. Same if you're doing it by hand. Again, you're going to measure in 1/4 of an inch using your ruler. Leave yourself maybe 2 inches that you are going to sew closed later to turn it. Each method you can either top sew it closed, or I can show you the ladder stitch, which is a hidden stitch to close it, which I think I'm going to do this time. So I'm going to put this on my machine and I'm going to sew all the way around the whole perimeter, leaving a 2-inch gap. That is described in the directions. Again, if you want to, I do offer little kits. They are a little bit more composed than these. This one's just a fun use it up project for me, but it shows the pattern really well, I think. But you can see from this one I'm calling Desert Floral that you would get 4 of these squares, 4 of these, and then the corresponding amount of solids. Some of them have a bunch of patterns. I just have random ones that I make up when I look through my bins and I find fabrics that I like together and I get inspired, then that's what I do. They each come with coordinating backing and all of the batting that you need to make the project, as well as the instructions that are printed out for you. So that makes it super, super easy. That's linked below. I have a nice assortment in my Etsy shop for all year round, but I will include a few Valentine Day theme ones so you can recreate very similarly. Might not use the skirt backing, but very similarly what I'm working on here. So I've just trimmed up around the outside. I've trimmed up any extra fabric that was on the outside, and I've notched those corners. So that just means taking my blade, or if you have scissors, and just cutting off that little bit of extra corner so that that bulk isn't down inside of the corner, making it like bumpy there. Okay, it just reduces the amount of stuff that's tucked in that very small space. And then I'm just gonna reach my hands inside my opening and turn the whole thing right side out. So just find that hole and tuck and push gently. You don't want to rip your seams, especially if you've hand sewn it. You might want to be a little careful. And then put your finger down in there, or you could put the dull end of a pencil in that hole. And you're going to just push gently into the corner. and poke it out so they lay nice and square. Sometimes I work it back and forth with my fingers. You just want to make it as nice and square as possible. So I'm going to finish this up, and then I like to give mine a good press. And you can also top stitch around them to make a quarter, to make a little top seam. But the pressing also helps with this, which I'm going to show you next, how to ladder stitch that closed. It just makes sure that they lay where they're supposed to lay. Okay, so that it lines up nicely to look really finished when it's done. So you can see here, I top stitch around with about 1/8 of an inch, and that would catch that little pocket the whole way around. And you can do that, or you could just do the ladder stitch, which I will show you next. But there you go. It's super simple, right? So we just have a couple of finishing touches. Okay, so I am going to show you how to close these up using a ladder stitch if you don't want to top stitch. I'm going to do it on this cute little pot holder that I made using the same pattern. This one, however, has a little pocket on the angle there for you to put your hand in and then grab things out of the oven. It's got this cute little tabby at the top. That's another design idea that I'll show you then. And I also will be offering a free downloadable pattern for this. It could be great if you just didn't want to hang it on the diagonal and have it less look like a heart, and you didn't want to do it in red and white. This could be a really fun just like design with this side, but if you hang it this way, now we're getting Valentine hearts, right? Same as with the little 4-patch coaster. So we're going to sew this closed with a ladder stitch if you don't want to top stitch the whole way around. This is a hidden stitch that will not allow your thread to be seen whenever you close it, just like our stitches here are on the edge of the fabric. We're going to follow that same line. So I thread my needle and I loop my thread and make a knot at the end. Then I'm going to come up right here where my last stitch with the machine stopped, so where my little back stitch was, and that's all in the instructions, of course. And then if you do the download or you get the little kit, that would all be in the instructions. Then I'm going to go right down right next to it, and I'm going to catch the loop and this extra thread, but I'm going to catch the loop that I tied the knot in. See that little loop from my knot? And I'm going to go back through that, and that's just a security thing. You don't necessarily have to do that, but that just keeps me from being able to pull my knot back out. And then I'm going to come right back up through. So the reason that you're going to press these really good is so you can see where those creases are going to line up right along the edge. So that's my 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to go right along that fold on both sides. So start by coming up. On one side, you want to hit at the top of the fold there, and then I'm going to go over across from it and up in that fold. So I'm going to bring my needle through the fabric in that fold and out right along the fold line. So I'm going parallel to the fold with my needle, and then I'm going to pull it through. Okay, and then I'm going to come over to the fold on this side and do the same thing and go down a stitch length. So you're coming directly across from where you just came up, and I'm going down 1 stitch length on the other side parallel to the fold. Okay, and I'm going to continue on. So catching my needle right on that fold and going 1 little stitch length, and then coming across right on the fold and going another stitch length. See how I am forming rungs of a ladder right there along the stitch line, and then when you pull it closed, it is hiding that entire seam along the edge. So you can't really see, and it gets better the more that you do. See, we still have a lot of fabric down here to work on, but I'm going to do that. I'll put you on fast forward here so that you can finish watching, and then we are gonna do the finishing touches. Okay, so does it need to be absolutely perfectly spaced? No, it doesn't. You're not going to see all of that, so don't stress. Whenever I get down here to where I back stitched to close it with my machine stitch, I am going to just come up right next to that spot, finish going over, and then I'm going to come out where the seam is. Can you see where that is? Just kind of bringing my needle out in the seam. Now I'm going to pull the whole thing closed. So just pulling gently on the thread to draw all of them together to create my seam. And it lays pretty nice and flat. And then I am going to take my needle back underneath and find a little stitch under there. So you can see the little stitch. I'm going underneath of it with my needle. And then I'm pulling my needle through. And I'm going to take it back through that loop that's created with my threads. And I'm going to make a little pretzel loop. So see my little twisted pretzel? And then when I pull on that, I'm going to gather all of those threads down into the seam. And I have a knot that's looped around where my machine was sewing. And then I'm just going to take my thread down through and send it up so I can bury the tail of that. Give it another last little tug to smooth everything out. And trim off the thread right at the base. Ta-da! See? And then if you want to, you can give it an extra little press. But you can't see any of that stitch work there along the edge. It's just as flat as the stitch work next to it. And that is how to do a hidden ladder stitch if you want to finish your pot holders without doing a top stitch, or if you want to finish your coasters without doing a top stitch. That's how you close that little turning hole. Okay, so thank you so much for joining me. Happy Valentine's Day and happy stitching. Okay, so here is my little coaster all finished. Very cute, very simple, very fun. We practiced working with 4-patch in sort of a different layout than the traditional style one. Again, that is like the most classic block that you can complete. If you want to learn how to do these, I do have those kits linked below. Super, super fun and simple, as you just saw. You could also do this yourself. Again, like I think it would be really cute in a recycled shirt, flannel. If you have someone's shirt maybe that they gave to you, or if they've passed away, this would be a great keepsake gift for family. You would get a lot of coasters out of just a few small pieces of each shirt. You could even do the back like I showed. That's a great way to recycle fabric. Or you can do the big size, which I will have this pattern as a free limited time download. You have to pick all of the threads off yourself, but I am going to write you up a pattern so that you can make your own heart-shaped pot holders for Valentine's Day if you would like, using this very simple method. For this one, I decided to go with a whole piece of cloth here, just because I didn't imagine most people were going to recycle on this project. But you could definitely do it with the square. I can put that in the directions for you too. But okay, I hope that this was inspirational and you got some really great ideas. Happy Valentine's Day, and here come the glamour shots. Bye-bye.